This video is sponsored by Dark Descent from Mammoth Factory. More on their exciting Kickstarter for a tome of forbidden lore later in the video. Picture a D&D campaign. There's a GM, 4 or 5 players, you create characters, you go on your first adventure. Every week this same group gets together, plays a session, hits the pause button, and comes back the next week to pick up where you left off. And you'll do this for 10 or 20 or 100 sessions until the campaign comes to an end. This is what we call a dedicated single-group campaign. And even though we think of it as the one true way to play an RPG, the truth is that it's not the only way. In fact, it's not even how Arneson and Gygax ran the original D&D campaigns. And now Critical Role says that it's not how they're going to run the new campaign 4 either. So, what do they know that you don't? And what are the 5 key things you need to know to run a campaign just like Arneson, Gygax, Brennan Lee Mulligan, and me? What we're talking about is a shared campaign world. Instead of having a single, dedicated group experiencing everything that happens in the world, you can instead run multiple groups simultaneously in the same setting. Which also means that the game world doesn't wait around for the players when they're not playing. Stuff keeps happening there. A shared campaign world lets a single GM support a lot more players than they could at a single table. I mean, you could, of course, also do that by running multiple single-group campaigns at the same time, but a shared campaign world can also mean a lot less prep for the GM. And on the player side of things, a shared campaign is exciting because you're suddenly in a living world. Your actions aren't just affecting the people sitting at the table with you. They're affecting people at other tables, people you may never meet. If Group A blows up a church, then when Group B gets together to play, they'll see the smoldering ruins as they ride into town. At my shared tables, I've seen alchemists create new concoctions that have saved the lives of people they've never played with. I've seen people start organizations joined by real people they've never even met. Our goal is always to make the campaign world feel like a real place where the actions of the PCs truly matter. And the cool thing about a shared setting is that this is kind of true. There are real people out there being affected by what your character is doing, and the stuff they're doing is affecting you and your character. A shared world campaign just hits different. But how do you actually run a shared world? What does it look like? Well, sometimes a shared world campaign will evolve out of a single dedicated table. Maybe you and a couple of buddies get together on Tuesday night. They roll up a halfling rogue and a halfling paladin and start going on adventures together. They're having a great time. In fact, they're having so much fun that Sean tells a couple of his friends about how cool the game is, and now they want to play too. So you invite them, and they want to play halflings too because they think it's funny. A few weeks later, your brother crashes the party. The all-halfling shtick is running a bit thin, so you convince him to roll up a human ranger. His girlfriend shows up for a few sessions, but then has to drop out when a new college semester starts, and she ends up with a class on Tuesday night. But apparently everyone is having a great time because they keep inviting more and more of their friends to play. And that's when you realize you have too many players. Now, you could start kicking players out, but it's not like you don't like playing with your friends. You just don't want to play with all of them at once. So instead, you split the group. Some of the players are free Thursday night, so you start a second table. The Tuesday night group heads west, and the Thursday night group heads east. And this is great. Both groups are still pursuing the same quest, just in different ways. One group sees armies on the march that are later fought by the other. NPCs cross over between the two tables. Now Liv is able to play on Thursday, so she comes back, but decides to play a different character this time. Later, though, she drops in on the Tuesday night table to guest star as her old PC. And in the big finale, the actions of one group are able to help the other group succeed, and vice versa. This is a shared world being played by multiple dedicated tables. The events at one table cross over with the events at the other table, and vice versa. But it's generally the same group of PCs getting together at each table and continuing their adventures together. A West Marches campaign, on the other hand, looks a little different. A West March is a specific type of open table created by Ben Robbins, in which the campaign takes place on the edge of civilization. In Ben's case, the western edge. There's a small community or military fort or something of the like located out there. And from this base of operations, the PCs venture forth into the unknown, always to the west, never to the east. Each expedition reveals more and more of the secrets beyond the horizon, with the PCs facing incredible dangers and being rewarded with wondrous treasures. Here's the trick, though. It's not the same PCs each time. Instead, the players arrange and schedule each expedition into the wild individually. The first expedition might be Christina, Peter, Eric, and Alan heading to the Temple of the Artificers. Christina and Peter might come back for the next session, but are joined this time by Sarah and Paul while they check out why the farmers at Caerwyn haven't been seen in town lately. After Alan gets infected with lycanthropy at Caerwyn, that group might play together 2 or 3 more times while seeking a cure, but in between those sessions, Eric might recruit Hunter and Gracie Lou to follow a treasure map he found in the Temple of the Artificers. When they come back to town, their eyes are glowing with a strange color, which they refuse to explain to anybody else. Meanwhile, Jacob has joined Team Lycanthropy and helped them track down a cure in the form of moon thistles growing up by the ancient dam. In an open table like this, every character has their own storyline. All of those storylines coexist with each other, and the totality of all these stories, all existing in the same world and interacting with each other and weaving together, is greater than the sum of their parts. A Westmarch-style campaign isn't the only way to achieve this dynamic, though. For example, this is Castle Blackmoor. It's the same model kit that Dave Arneson built when he was creating the modern role-playing game and launching that campaign that would become Dungeons & Dragons. Beneath this castle, Arneson placed a vast labyrinthine dungeon. It was so large that today we call dungeons like this a mega dungeon. A dungeon so large that you could play an entire campaign in them and never run out of adventures. In the Arnesonian mega dungeon, the player's home base was Blackmoor Village, at the foot of the hill on which Blackmoor Castle was built. During each session, just like the Westmarchers would later do, the adventurers in Blackmoor that day would form up an expedition and journey down into the depths of the dungeon, exploring its strange secrets, and then choosing to share those secrets, or not, with the rest of the adventuring community. In the earliest days of D&D, everyone ran an Arnesonian mega dungeon. Everyone put a castle on a hill and carved out a mega dungeon beneath it. Greg Svensson, a player in Arneson's group, created Tonicsborg. Gary Gygax copied the formula for his own Castle Greyhawk. When Ed Greenwood created Undermountain in 1975, it was a variation on the same theme. Following in their footsteps, I ran my own version of Arneson's Blackmoor as an open table for several years. Now, if you're looking for your own D&D world to share, you should check out Dark Descent from Mammoth Factory Games, the sponsor of today's video. Take the wagon down to Deephold, a terrifying subterranean realm where the surface has banished its criminals. Here, among the ruins of the Anak Empire, the Surfaceborn are trying to make the best of their new lives. But out there, in the dark, the Voidborn crawl. Strange mage hunters from beyond time and space, drawn to the arcane arts. Beware and cast with care to avoid becoming the target of something beyond the ken of mortal minds. What dark powers will you master to survive and thrive in these terrible depths? Dark Descent will tempt you with forbidden subclasses, infernal spells, and the gruesome rites of blood alchemy. It also includes the Exiles of Deephold Adventure Path, a 6-part campaign of corruption. Although freed from their chains after being banished for their crimes, the fate of the PCs becomes inextricably bound to the lightless depths due to the eldritch infection known as Voidstone Sickness. I'm excited about the dark fantasy survival horror of the Exiles of Deephold. There are spoilers I'm not even allowed to talk about that are blowing my mind. But I'm enthralled by the setting. We talked about the role a home base like Blackmoor can play in a shared campaign world. In Dark Descent, Lowtown, the botany bay of the Underdark built into the ruins of an inverted ziggurat from the Anak Empire, is absolutely perfect for this. Populated by the criminals and discarded exiles of the surface world, it's a dim light of civilization in a sea of darkness, a tangled nest of factions, sins, and half-broken dreams, perched in the middle of vast ruins and strange realms. Countless expeditions can be sent out into those Stygian expanses, unlocking secrets both thrilling and terrifying, and who can say what fate your players will carve out for themselves down here, shaping the destiny of what Lowtown and all of Deephold may become. So, let's say that you hit the Kickstarter link in the font of all knowledge down below, you grab your own copy of Dark Descent, and you want to launch a shared campaign world based out of Lowtown. There are 5 key things you need to know to run a successful shared campaign. First, Is this going to be an open table or a multi-table campaign? For Season 4 of Critical Role, Brennan Lee Mulligan is running multiple tables. The 13 players have been split up into 3 dedicated groups based on their style of play: the Soldiers, the Seekers, and the Schemers. If you've got players who enjoy different ways of playing the game, this can be a great way to give everyone more of what they love best. But there are other ways to think about the focus of each table, too. In our Lowtown campaign, for example, we might have one group going out to explore the unknown reaches of the Deephold, while another stays in town, enmeshed in the political machinations of House Talona, the Red Ladies, and Vazano, the Bandit King. Now, the other option, though, is an open table. Instead of the soldiers always playing at the soldiers' table and the seekers always playing with the other seekers, in an open table, the players freely mix and match, and importantly, can play when they're available, and skip the sessions when they're not, without affecting everyone else's ability to play. This gives open tables an immense scheduling flexibility, and also the ability to support truly huge numbers of players. This is how Arneson and Gygax played, and it's why the original D&D rulebook talked about a campaign having 50 or more players. When I ran my first open table, it grew to have more than 60 active players, and my new Mothership open table has 20 players participating. Running an open table has a number of unique challenges and opportunities, and I'm going to be doing a video deep dive on the topic next month. So if you want to learn how to run your own open table, subscribe. And in the meantime, when this video is done, you can also check out the Open Table Manifesto in the font of all knowledge. But for right now, the next thing to consider is whether your shared campaign world is going to have one GM or multiple GMs. The advantage of multiple GMs is that you can split up the load. Multiple GMs can prep more and run more sessions than a single GM can. The drawback, of course, is that it takes extra effort to coordinate with the other GMs and make sure all the continuity between groups and sessions matches up. There are some tricks you can use to simplify this, though. For example, if you divide the campaign world up into separate sections and give each GM exclusive dominion over their own section, you can dramatically reduce the amount of information they need to swap back and forth between them. For example, although designed for a dedicated table, the new D&D starter set, Heroes of the Borderlands, divides the Borderlands into 3 sections: the Keep on the Borderlands, the Wilderness, and the Caves of Chaos. Now, instead of having a single DM, you can give each of these adventure books to a different dungeon master. When the players go to the Keep, Julia runs those adventures, and when they leave the Keep and want to check out the strange ruins they've heard about in the woods, that's when Asante can take over and run the adventures in his book. Now, this also means that Julia could jump in and play her character when the group moves into the wilderness, and vice versa for Asante. Similarly, Dave Arneson eventually added more dungeon masters to the original Blackmoor campaign, but at least at first they were running their own dungeons. Players' characters would literally travel from Arneson's Blackmoor to Greg Svensson's Tonigsburg, for example, at which point Greg would be able to run them through the adventures he had created there. For our Dark Descent campaign, we might have one game master who runs adventures in Lowtown and another game master who runs expeditions out into the Deephold. Alternatively, we could slice the Deephold up into quadrants and assign each quadrant to a different game master. Players might decide ahead of time what type of adventure they want to run. Okay, we want to head back out and explore those Fleshcraft laboratories, right? So we'll need to schedule a session with Julia next time. Or, if both GMs are available, they might swap out in the middle of a session, depending on where the PCs are going at any particular moment. Now, with all this table swapping and session swapping going on, we come to another important question. How many characters should one player play? In most dedicated single-group campaigns, the expectation is that each player has one character, their character. And maybe they'll create a new character if that one dies or retires for some reason, but they'll still only have one character at a time. Chris is playing Cora, Heather's playing Kitty Soth. That's it. Even in a dedicated campaign, though, there can be exceptions to this. For example, I have a video about how players can run spectacular sidekicks by running multiple characters at the same time. And games like Ars Magica feature Troupe-style play, which will be the topic of another upcoming video. In Troupe play, each player has multiple characters and chooses which character to play for each adventure. But these are obviously the exception, not the rule in dedicated single-table campaigns. In a multi-table campaign, though, some players might play at multiple tables, running different characters at each one. And in an open table, we often talk about players having a stable of characters. Since the structure of the campaign is already flexible about who's playing in each session, it's just as easy for one person to pick any one of their 5 different characters to play as it is for any one of 5 different players to show up for a particular night. Depending on the exact form your shared world takes, you may discover strong reasons for preferring single PCs or multiple PCs, but often either will work, depending on the preferences of the GM, the group, and the individual player. So the next thing you need to think about in a shared world is continuity. I mean, Group A is doing stuff at the same time stuff is happening with Group B, and you need to make sure it all, fits together and makes sense. I mean, otherwise, what's the point of all this? If Group A burns down a building in one session, Group B shouldn't find it completely unharmed the next day. If Christina and Heather are chatting about the campaign, they shouldn't discover that both of their characters pulled the same sword from the stone. There are sort of 3 main things to think about when it comes to continuity like this. First, keeping time synced. You don't have to keep multiple tables in perfect lockstep with each other, but you do fundamentally need to know whether event A from Table 1 happened before or after what's currently happening at Table 2. Gary Gygax infamously wrote that you cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept, and the fact he was running open tables is one of the reasons why he said it. Now, the other thing to keep in mind about cross-table continuity is that you want to show the effects. If Group A actually does blow up a building, or I guess, more likely when they blow up a building, then you want Group B to see the smoking ruins. In fact, depending on the strict time records you're keeping, they might even hear the explosion in the middle of their next session. These shared events will become more common the closer the groups are to each other in the setting, but the larger the event, the farther away its effects will be felt. And a truly cataclysmic event might be felt throughout the multiverse. Now, conversely, this means that continuity becomes easier to juggle the farther apart the PCs are. It also becomes easier the more closely synced their timelines are. This is because if our Lowtown group gets 3 months ahead of our Deephold explorers, for example, then when the explorers return to town, we can end up with a ton of established continuity, the next 3 months of events, that the Deephold explorers aren't allowed to interfere with. It becomes a straitjacket, and it can be difficult to navigate. On the other hand, if the Deephold group gets 3 months ahead and comes back to town, well, what should town even look like? At this point, our Lowtown group was in the middle of working with an undead Anak noble to assassinate the bandit king with the help of a dark maiden. Will they succeed? I mean, if so, Lowtown is going to look very different 3 months later when those explorers get back, which they're doing right now at their table. You can see how confusing this gets. So, the closer the PCs get to each other in a shared world, the more tightly you'll want their timelines to align. Things can desync, though, for any number of reasons. The Deephold group might have scheduling issues, allowing the Lowtown group to surge ahead of them. On the other hand, the Deephold group does a lot more traveling than the Lowtown group, which can chew up a lot more of game world time in a single session. Travel times, though, can also work to your advantage. With very little effort, you can fudge travel times around to help resync your groups. Or you can give a group that's falling behind a scenario hook that requires some uneventful but time-consuming travel so that they can catch up to a group that's gotten ahead of them. For similar reasons, the time between adventures can really be your friend here. When it comes to helping a group catch up, there's nothing faster than saying, "It's been 3 months since you slayed the Void Worm." Some games use adventure turns. For example, Ars Magica uses season-based play, in which PCs can only go on a single adventure each season. These can actually greatly exacerbate desynchronization between tables, since it forces everyone into the same cadence of adventures. But if the game also offers alternatives to adventure, which Ars Magica does in the form of magical research, for example, then they can also provide a structure where characters that are falling behind can quickly speed through multiple seasons of play and catch up. Another method is to sync the game world to real-world time. If you go on a 3-month journey in a single session, that's fine, but your character will be locked down until the rest of the world catches up to them. This method is particularly useful for open tables, and I'll discuss that in more detail in that video. But whether you're syncing to the real-world time or not, this is where having a stable of PCs can also be very useful. Players who end up with a massively desynced character don't have to stop playing. They can just swap to a different character that's still in sync and help everyone else catch up. Which brings us to the final key for running shared worlds: how the PCs at the different tables interact with each other. Now, the simplest method is to simply leave the groups divided. The Lowtown group plays their game, the Deephold group plays theirs. They occasionally experience shared events and see evidence of what the other group is doing, but they're ultimately each playing their own game. You can spice things up, though, by adding special crossover sessions. These crossover sessions might feature just a couple of PCs jumping from one table to another and back, but it could also be an epic session with everyone playing at the same time. Crossover sessions are often something that a multi-table will build up to over time, but Critical Role launched their multi-table campaign with several overture sessions in which everyone played together before splitting up into the soldiers, the seekers, and the schemers. Of course, running a session for a dozen different players at the same time can be extremely challenging. The excitement of the crossover can make it worthwhile, but if your multi-table features multiple GMs and you're looking for something maybe a little more manageable, consider running a multi-pronged scenario. These scenarios look like the end of the Phantom Menace. One group is fighting the droid army, another is infiltrating the palace, another is trying to destroy the Trade Federation flagship, and a fourth ends up splitting off to deal with a Sith apprentice. For a scenario like this, you're basically running multiple adventures simultaneously. Quite possibly in the same room, but certainly at the same location, or maybe the same Discord server. Each table is pursuing a separate objective, all of which combine together to achieve their collective goal. Importantly, multi-pronged scenarios can also feature crossovers, shared events, and all the other stuff that makes shared world campaigns so cool. It just happens at a hyper-compressed scale. For example, you might have two of the tables join together for a big fight to liberate the space fighters before one team flies up into space while the other heads deeper into the palace. And of course, you might have a team create a distraction, provide cover fire, remotely unlock doors, or otherwise assist each other in any way they might imagine. Some PCs might also shift from one table to another over the course of the adventure. Now, if you don't have multiple GMs, or if your gaming schedules just can't align so that you can bring everyone together at the same time, you can get a similar effect at a larger scale with a multi-pronged quest. This can be the structure of an entire campaign. This is what we see in The Lord of the Rings, where all of the heroes are pursuing the destruction of Sauron, whether they're trying to reach Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring, rousing the Ents, or fighting in the wars of Rohan and Gondor. It's also how the new season of Critical Role is going to be organized after the Overture, with the Seekers, Soldiers, and Schemers all pursuing different paths as they try to discover the truth behind the fall of Thiazi Fang. For something even more challenging, though, rather than having the groups allied with each other, they can instead play each other's antagonists. Returning to Dark Descent, for example, we could imagine one group working as agents of House Talona, trying to build Lowtown into a prosperous trading hub between the surface world and the riches of Deephold. And we could imagine the other group working as agents for the Bandit King, secretly working to undermine House Talona's control and liberate the city. Such campaigns require a great deal of care and flexibility when it comes to managing continuity between the two antagonistic groups. But the results, they can be thrilling. The players get to set themselves against equal opponents in an epic battle of wits, and as the GM, you have ringside seats. The possibilities of a shared world are truly only limited by the imaginations of you and your players. I'd like to thank Mammoth Factory for sponsoring this video. Their Kickstarter campaign for Dark Descent, featuring 400 plus pages of setting and adventure material, 8 forbidden subclasses, 8 subterranean races, 40 Underdark battle maps, 50 infernal spells, 70 unholy monsters, 50 profane magic items, and more than 200 highly detailed STL miniature models is happening right now. Click the link in the Font of All Knowledge down below to back it, and let them know the Alexandrian sent you. Now, if you decide to run your own shared world campaign out of Lowtown and into the depths of the Deephold, come back and let us know how it goes. Good gaming. This is Justin Alexander, and I'll see you at the table.